Hey, this is Veronica Setsky, and you're watching Pax8 Live.
We want to help you take your MSP business to the next level.
We have just expanded the amount of resources that you as partners have through Pax8.
Real security is about how you manage the losses, how you take the punches, how well you detect, how well you respond.
This is where we'll be bringing you content that you want to see every week to help you grow your business.
And I think the real winners here are the managed service providers.
Who is this?
Chief Cuteness Officer.
My advice is know what you're selling and know whether it's making you money.
I ended up living in Korea for 4 years.
I was wondering when we were going to talk about the elephant in the room.
But thanks, Dad.
Let's talk about risk assessment. So there's all kinds of ways to respond to risk.
Man, it's great to see you, Dom.
If you're really interested in just the nerdy bits of home security, definitely check out those resources. That was a huge thunder.
We keep finding ways that we're helping partners, finding either, balance in their life or focus or purpose.
Practices that are going to help improve your project management skills or your finances.
We're here to talk about setting long-term goals and then how to achieve them.
Increasing your quality, therefore becoming the best place in town to work. Welcome to Academy Live. Hey everyone, it's just me today. Chris and Bessie are off. I'm excited to share with you all something that I came up with about 7 years ago. Maximizing the profitability in your business depends on your understanding of the 4 levers of gross margin. I'll guide you through the engineer pay rate, billing rate, billable utilization, and this thing we call the fixed fee effective ratio, and show you how to use this insight to understand your gross service margin and its relationship with your profit and loss statement. I'm going to give you a presentation over the course of this episode, and I look forward to answering any questions you might have in the chat. But first, here's the quote of the day, and I've always loved this one. Revenue is for vanity, profit is for sanity, by Peter Drucker. And this one kind of hits home with me, when I see, a company hitting $10 million in revenue, I wonder always, but are they making money, right? You can have $10 million in revenue and be going out of business, losing money. And that's why profit is for sanity. So I wanted to take a couple of minutes. First of all, I'm super excited to be doing this show. The first several shows that we did, we were talking about what is Pax8 Academy. We were doing a lot of introductions to all the people involved in the Academy. And we talked about what was going on in Beyond. Academy had a huge role in Beyond 23, and it looks like we're going to also have that same huge role in Beyond 24. But I'm really looking forward to this show because really it's the first one where we're really going to get into some real educational content, stuff that you can kind of look at it, download some tools, and work with it and put your own numbers in it and work through it. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Kind of where this came from is, I've been talking with hundreds of service managers over the last 12 years. And, I kept being on these calls, talking through some problem or, trying to get some concept across around the financial metrics. And I had all these little individual spreadsheets. And it, for a long time, I would just sort of make them on the fly as I was trying to explain a concept. And I remember, like I said, 6 or 7 years ago, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to spend some time. It was kind of probably an all-nighter. And I'm just going to pour everything I know about the financial side of running one of these solution provider businesses into kind of one giant interconnected spreadsheet. And it ended up working out that I could use it like almost every time I'm having any kind of a financial conversation. I could bring up this spreadsheet and kind of manipulate it so you can see, well, what happens to gross margin? What happens to profitability if I make this decision or I choose to work on this particular business process? Um, so I've shared it many times over the years, and I figured in our listeners base out there today, there's probably going to be some that haven't seen it yet, and I know there's a ton of partners that we can make this, a resource in the Pax8 Academy for you guys to look at going forward. So um, I'm going to go ahead and dive in and share my screen here. I'm going to start with a little bit of PowerPoint so we can kind of talk through the 4 levers of gross margin. So let's just go ahead and dive in. And like I said, I'm going to be watching the chat. So, feel free to jump in, drop any questions in there, and we'll try to keep an eye on it because I really do want to be able to answer the questions live as we go. So the first thing I want to talk about really is what is service gross margin? And there's kind of 2 main definitions I want to get out there. One is gross margin dollars. The other is gross margin percent, right? So it's a math formula. For the margin dollars, we're going to take all of our service revenue and we're going to subtract from that our service hard costs and our service labor, right? And that's going to give us our gross margin dollars. So for example, if you were reselling a product, right? I bought a server for $800 and I sold it for $1,000. I'd have $200 in gross margin. And then just to get the language out there, after you do that, then you pay a salesperson. We call it SG&A. You pay the rent. You pay a few other things. After you subtract all that, you'll have your net profit. So, and gross margin percent is going to be your gross margin dollars. Divided by your service revenue times 100, and that'll give us our gross margin percent. So here's a very oversimplified profit and loss statement. A lot of the service executives, service managers that I'm talking to, they may not have actually ever seen a profit and loss statement. And again, this one's way oversimplified. But in the top right there, I've got $1, right? So we've got $1 coming in. Let me get my laser pointer out here. We've got this dollar coming in as service revenue, and we've got some costs, right? I've got direct labor. If I'm going to have $1 of service revenue, I'm looking to pay out, and this isn't loaded with taxes and benefits and stuff. I'm trying to keep the numbers simple here, but I got my direct labor cost of goods sold. It should be around 33 cents. And my hard costs, that's my tools. I've got an RMM tool. I provide an antivirus license, something like that. So I'm going to subtract that, and what's going to be left over is my service gross margin, and that's called above the line. You'll hear us talk about, is that a cost of goods sold above the line, or is that an expense which would be below the line? So then our expenses is SG&A, sales, general, and administrative expenses. And that's going to be, paying a salesperson, paying the marketing, getting, having the website developed, having managers involved, having, a bookkeeper. That's our management and admin. We have other operating expenses, taxes, rent, training. Notice I've got a little line in there for your investment here, because we do want to be investing in the business. And the company at the end has maybe a 22%, in this case, with $1, that would be 22 cents, a 22% net profit. So this is, again, basically what a basic profit and loss statement for a services company might look like. And your financial model, this is a financial model. Your model may vary. But again, I just wanted to put something up as an example. So from a key performance indicator perspective, there are some things that I need to measure in a service department. And one KPI, or key performance indicator, is going to be time entry, right? Are all of my engineers entering their full 8 hours? And as we go through the spreadsheet here in a little while, you'll sort of understand why that's important. My services labor loaded gross margin percent. Again, I've got a goal. Again, not loaded with taxes and benefits and some of that other stuff. It's a little. It's more like 55% if we fully load it in the way we look at the numbers. But for simplicity's sake, I'm just talking about kind of raw pay, what we pay an engineer here. Yeah, I'm looking for that to be above 65%. My services direct labor as a percent of raw gross margin. Now, when I say raw gross margin, that is, I'm going to take my revenue minus my hard costs and then look at my gross margin after that. So that's going to be my raw gross margin. I want to keep that labor cost under 33%. So if I've got $100,000 in services revenue, I'm looking to have about $33,000 a month in engineer salary, just raw salary there. So, and then I do look at labor loaded gross margin dollars produced per engineer. That one's a little bit misleading. It's hard to compare from one client to the next. The percentages are going to be the same no matter what market you're in. It doesn't matter if you're in New York or small town America. The percentages are going to be the same. Actually, anywhere in the world, it doesn't really matter if you're running a services organization. And by the way, I didn't make this stuff up. I learned this from my CPA. That's the way they ran their accounting firm. Any kind of a professional services firm, a heating and air conditioning company, a solution provider, if you're selling time, these are sort of the metrics that you're looking to use. But labor loaded gross margin dollars produced, you have to be careful with that one because, in a major metro like in New York or Los Angeles, the dollars per engineer is going to be very different than small town. So, so let's get into this 4 levers concept a little bit. The first lever, and when I say lever, I kind of picture myself, kind of like a train engineer running the train, right? I got all these levers I move, and depending on where I put them is, whether I'm going to produce a profit or not. And so the first lever is in engineer pay. I'll get a quick preview. It's engineer pay, it's billing rate, it's utilization, and then the fourth lever we call this agreement efficiency. So imagine if I have these 4 levers and I increase pay, but I don't change the rest of them, my margin or my profit's going to go down, right? If I increase my billing, but don't change utilization or efficiency or pay, well, then my profit's going to go up. So the question is, how should I be paying my engineering team? And again, it's going to come down to having the percentages. Now, not all services are created equal. So when we have technical services, which is that ad hoc break fix work or staff augmentation, that's when you put an engineer on site for 40 hours a week and the client determines what work is being done. I'm actually pretty happy with a 50% labor cost, which would be a 2.0 multiple of pay. That's a very inefficient way to deliver service. So if I can do professional services, which is scope project work, now instead of just having somebody on the bench and going on site, finding out I don't have the right part and going back to the office and going back on site and not billing for part of that, that contributes to that inefficiency in break fix or tech services. But in professional services, we've got scope project work. Normally we order all the parts arrive, and then we schedule an engineer to go on site. Typically that's for full days, which means I have higher utilization. I'm actually looking for a 40% labor cost, which would be, that they're producing revenue at a rate of 2.5 times their pay. But with managed services, when we're leveraging tools and technology and standardization, and that standardization of our tool sets and standardization of the processes and standardization of the hardware, our whole solution stack, when we're really leveraging those things, there's no reason we shouldn't have labor costs around 25% of our revenue, which would equate to a 4.0 revenue multiple on wages. Now, typically, we've got engineers doing some combination of all 3 of these. So a combined all services is going to be somewhere around that 33% or that 3.0 W2 multiple or multiple of wages. So that's lever 1 is like, what should we be paying? And really, it's a function of what we're able to produce as revenue. Now, lever 2 is the engineer billing rate, right? This is the amount that we can charge for the services rendered. Now, you got to be careful with this, that we tier it by skill level. And when I show a chart in a little while, that's going to make a little bit more sense. But, if I have a more highly compensated engineer, they need to be billing the clients at a higher billing rate, where a more entry level, lower compensated engineer, I can bill a little bit lower rate and still get my percentages I'm looking for. When I don't tier it, you end up with, well, if it's $100 an hour, no matter who you send, then I want your most experienced person all the time. So that becomes a problem when you don't tier your rates. And when it's tiered, then now you'll have people saying, well, I really don't need the most expensive person. Send me somebody with a little bit less experience and charge me a little bit less per hour. And don't forget your modifiers, right? After hours, you have to pay maybe some overtime. You need to be billing some overtime to keep all your percentages in check. Same thing with emergencies, weekends, holidays. Now you can mess with that a little bit with fixed fee, and we're getting into the fourth lever a little bit there. But you got to be careful that your billing rate matches that skill level and what you have to pay your engineers. Let's talk about the third lever, which is utilization. And you guys, I am looking for questions in the chat, so feel free to jump in. But you'll hear that an engineer should be able to bill 75% of their time. So let's look at where that number comes from. Here I've got about 13 sick and vacation days per year, right? 10 days of PTO or vacation or holiday, and 3 days of sick is kind of a common number, especially in the US. I got 6 paid holidays per year. I know some of our European friends are probably laughing at these numbers a little bit, but we're going to go with that. Same thing with our APAC friends. Now I've got 2 training days per year in here, right? That's 16 hours a year. I've got 2 1-hour meetings a week where we know our engineer is going to be attending some kind of a meeting, so they're not out billing a client. Two 1-hour meetings a week is 96 hours a year, right? When you look at those numbers. And I've got a 1/4 hour a day of non-billable travel. Again, you can kind of substitute in whatever numbers you want when we look at the actual spreadsheet. And I've got a 1/2 hour a day of unaccounted for time. And I think that's a very good target number, is a 1/2 hour a day where you're unable to account for the work that they did. In a time entry scenario, within the academy coaching world, we tend to call that payroll wrap. It's kind of a wrapper time entry you put on your whole day. Which again, that's 120 hours a year. So, across the year, we've got 492 hours. Now, the number is 2,080, 40 hours a week times 52 week is 2,080 hours. So that works out to 24% of an engineer's time that they're working for us throughout the year that we know that they're not doing any billing, which is kind of where that 75% billable target comes from. Now, and 75% is what is considered generally a very sustainable number. Yeah, you're going to have weeks where the engineers are running hot and they're at 90 or 100, maybe even 110% billable, but that's not what we would consider sustainable, and you're going to burn your team out. But notice this 13 days, 6 days, and 2 days. That's 21 days. It's going to come into. I want to share kind of what that means. Because if you look at it and say, well, gosh, 75% billable, they need 6 hours billable of my 8 hours every day. At the end of the year, we're not going to average 75% billable, because you got to account for those 21 days where there's 0% billable. So that's what this chart is about. We've got our 2,080 hours. 152 hours is those 21 days of sick and vacation and training where we know there's 0% billable. So that really only leaves 1,928 hours, which means they have to be 82% billable on the days they're at work in order to have a 75% average for the year. And I've seen a lot of service managers wonder why they're not hitting their they're not hitting their gross margin numbers. And it's because they're only looking for 6 hours billable a day instead of 6.5 hours billable a day when you go account for the 21 days that they're not at work at all. Again, keeping an eye out for questions. So be careful with that one. Now, this particular chart is showing 3 of the levers. It's showing engineer pay, which is along this axis over here, and we're showing the billing rate, which is along this top axis. And the dark green stripe through the middle is at the 75%, and that's really where we want to be. So, a 60K person somewhere in this area at 75% billable needs to bill about 150 an hour, where if I had a 100K person down here at 75% billable, that's not even on the chart, it's more like 190 an hour, billing 6.5 hours every day. If they want to hit 3x, so a 3 times billing multiple, if I paid them $5,000 a month, they're billing 15,000, as a reference. If I pay them $100 a month, that's a 100K salary, they need to bill, 25,000 a month. And the only way they're going to be able to do that at 75% billable is if their billing rate and utilization lines up with their pay. So a lot of times I show this to one of our partners and they're like, oh my gosh, I've got a problem in one of my first 3 levers. My billing rate is too low, or my pay is too high, or I'm not getting a half hour a day of unaccounted for time. I'm getting 2 hours a day of unaccounted for time. So, that means they got the same pay, but I'm not looking at 75% utilization at 115 an hour. We're only really getting 60% utilization. So that same engineer needs to bill 150 an hour to get my margins at a 33% labor cost, which would be a 67% margin. So, the facts are in the numbers. And again, we're going to, in a few minutes, we're going to download a spreadsheet to help us understand this. But before we do that, I'd like to talk about our 4th lever. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to take a look at this spreadsheet talking about these first 3 levers. Over here, I've got my levers set at a $60,000 engineer, right, which is divided by 12 is $5,000 a month is what we pay. And I've got a $150 an hour billing rate. The 76 number is actually calculated. Let's see, this is 13 sick and vacation days a year. 6 paid holidays, 2 training days, 2 10-minute breaks. 2 10-minute breaks is 80 hours a year. 2 1-hour meetings a week, quarter hour a day. So, we've got this all worked out. Here's our 82% billable. That 60K person. Oops, I got to scroll left here. That 60K person at 75% billable. Here's that 115 an hour. I've got 100K person down here. Again, not even on the chart, but it's about 195 an hour. So you can kind of see those 3 levers. If I'm not getting a half hour a day of unaccounted for time, it's more like what we normally find when we start working with a partner at 2 hours a day. Now I've got 800 hours where they're not billing throughout the year. They need to be 57% billable. I've got a 17% gap on my 75% general target, but 57%, that same 60K person that at 75% billable needed to bill 115 an hour. Now that they're only 58% billable, I got over in this area, instead of 115 an hour to hit 3x, they need to bill more like 155 an hour to hit 3x. And that's kind of what I mean by I built this spreadsheet so we can play with it, right? We can move them to 20 vacation days a year, right? And the percentage barely moved, right? Oh, that was a half hour a day. But that percentage barely moved. It's, to 73% versus 13 sick and vacation days is 74%, right? So, I mean, we can give people more vacation time. It barely affects our gross margin throughout the year, but an extra hour a day of unaccounted for time has a massive impact on just those first 3 levers. So anyway, I'm going to jump back to my presentation here, and I want to talk about that 4th lever a little bit. So I'm going to introduce the 4th lever. It is what I call the effective ratio. And this is where we're comparing our billed service revenue to something we call shadow billable. So the billed service revenue is the amount we billed for our fixed fee services, and our shadow billable is what we would have charged that client if we were charging them time and materials. Like, does that make sense? It's what we would have billed that client if we were charging them time and materials. So for example, let's say I have a $1,200 a month contract. I subtract out my $200 of hard costs for RMM and antivirus and anti-spam and some security tool set we have out there. And that leaves me $1,000 of service revenue in the contract. And I've got my labor rate at $100 an hour. Again, just trying to do some easy math here. I got 8 hours logged. So I've done $800 worth of work. If I was billing this client time and materials, I would have sent them an invoice for $800, but they paid us a $1,000 flat fee. So my effective ratio is $1,000 that they actually paid us divided by the $800 worth of work we did is 1.25. That's my ratio. I'm in effect working for 125% of my normal billing rates. So let's look at how that might play out in actual time entry. So these are I've got some individual time entries. I've got Bob did an hour of help desk work at $100 an hour rate, so the shadow billable is $100. Fred did 2 hours worth of work at our after hours rate, which is $200. So Fred, the value of the work that Fred did for this client during this month is $400. And Tim is a senior engineer at our 150 rate, did 2 hours, so that's $300. And this is where our $800 of shadow billable comes from. And again, we divide it by the $1,000 the client actually paid us. My ratio is 1.25. Now, here's the thing. Bob did not produce $100 worth of revenue for the company to put in the bank. He actually produced at 125% of our normal billing rates, $125 in actual cash to put in the bank. This $400 time entry is actually $500 worth of cash, right? And this is how now I can understand exactly how much revenue each engineer produced when I got multiple engineers servicing flat fee. So, again, I'm allocating the revenue to the engineers that did the work proportional to the value of the work they did. And it's always going to add back up to that $1,000 flat fee that the client actually paid us. But it doesn't always work out that way. Here, Bob did 5 hours worth of work at the $100 rate, 3 hours at after hours, and 1 hour at senior engineer work. So we've actually done $1,250 worth of work. Again, that's what we would have billed the client if we were billing them time and materials. But they paid us a flat fee of $1,000. So 1,000 divided by 1,250 is a 0.8. So in effect, on this contract, we're working for 80% of our normal billing rates. So that $500 worth of work the engineer did, they didn't put $500 in the bank account. They actually only put $400 in the bank account. And now I can use this number to add up, well, how much revenue did that engineer actually produce based on all the other time entry done to support this flat fee? And again, this works with flat fee projects, flat fee tickets, monthly flat fee agreements. It's all the same logic. I want to show you the impact of this fourth lever. And that we can see in this chart here. So I'm going to start with the 1.0 ratio. Right, meaning this 1.0 right here means we did exactly $1,000 worth of work for that $1,000 flat fee. So that means my effective rate is 150, right? My rate's 150. I'm at a 1.0 ratio. I'm at 150. At 150 an hour, it takes 100 hours right? So I got an engineer that I'm paying $60,000. I got an engineer I'm paying $60,000 divided by 12 months is $5,000 a month, times 3 is $15,000. If I've got an engineer, I'm paying $5,000 a month, they need to bill $15,000. Well, that's 100 hours at 150 an hour. In a given month, there's 173.3 hours. So, but they only have to be 58% billable to hit 3 times their pay. But we know at 75% billable, they'll be billing 132 hours. So at a 1.0 ratio, an engineer should be able to produce just under 20,000 a month in billing. At that 1.25, meaning we're doing $800 worth of work on that flat fee to earn that $1,000. Now my effective rate is 125% of 150 is 187.50. They only have to be 46% billable to hit 3x, which is 80 hours. But if they can be 75% billable at 187.50 an hour at 132 hours, then they're billing 25K. Now, the break even on that 15,000 right here is right around a 0.8 ratio, meaning we're doing about $1,250 worth of work every month to earn that $1,000 flat fee. At 80% of our normal rates, we're in effect working for 120 an hour. They have to basically be fully utilized at 125 hours to hit 3x. They can barely get over it with their 75% billable at 132 hours. They're barely hitting their target. But I got to tell you, when we start working with partners and we start really calculating this data, we're going to come up with a 0.5 effective ratio. I find many of our flat fee agreements out there, we're doing $2,000 worth of work for that $1,000 flat fee. We're in effect working for 50% of our normal billing rates. You'd have to be 115% billable. It's not going to happen. They're going to be 75% billable, if you're doing a good job with utilization. And they're only producing revenue at a rate of 2x, right? That's a 50% labor margin, and that's a recipe for going out of business. So just a little bit more, one last slide here. I just kind of want to recap that I've got these 4 levers, right? I've got engineer pay, I've got billing rate, I've got their percent billable, and I've got the fixed fee effective ratio. And when we're moving those levers, as a manager, I set my engineer pay, I set my billing rate, I create process and procedure around the life of the ticket, triage, dispatch, time entry. That's how I control their percent billable. And again, I'm moving that lever. And as I move those first 3 levers, as we'll look at in the spreadsheet here in a few minutes, there's not very much movement. I don't have a lot of control over my gross margin with those 3 levers. Engineer pay is kind of set by geography and maybe some of their skill set. Billing rate's kind of the same, right? My billing rate in New York or Los Angeles is going to be way higher than it is in small town. But percent billable, again, I've got some movement in that lever, but really where I can make that movement is how much are we leveraging tools, technology, and standardization in the way we deliver our services. You saw in that chart, I can have an engineer billing 10K a month for each engineer because I paid them $5,000 a month, or I can have them billing 20 or 25,000 a month because I've invested in automation and leveraging tools, technology, standardized documentation, standardized tool sets. And that's where I can have a ton of movement in the levers. So let's take a look at that 4th lever as we look at that. So let me zoom in a bit. I got my 2,080 paid hours a year, which is 40 hours times 52 weeks. I've got an assumption that after an engineer can bill 3 times their pay, again, a 60K person is 5,000 a month. They need to bill about 15,000. So kind of here's some of that math calculated out, right? I got that 150 billing rate. I've got my ratio to 1.0, meaning I'm doing exactly $1,000 worth of work for that $1,000 flat fee. That's averaging $28.85 an hour in my pay. I've got 173 hours a month to work with. At 5,000 times 3 is 15,000. Here's that 150 rate, which means I need to be 100 hours of that 173, which is 58%. And again, this calculates out what your ratio looks like and what kind of leverage you get in that 4th lever. doing $2,000 worth of work for every $1,000 in flat fee. I don't have an engineer getting in bonus territory. They're billing about 10K. I'm at a 2.0 multiple of wages, and I got a 51% margin. Around a 0.8, with that 150 an hour rate and the 60K engineer, I doing $1,250 worth of work for every $1,000 in flat fee. I'm just going to barely tap that 3x mark. They beat their 15,000 goal by $574. Up here, I've got this set that I'll give them 20% of whatever they beat it by. So it's a small $114 bonus. I'm right at a 33% direct labor, which is a 3.04 multiple of wages. But man, if I can do exactly $1,000 worth of work, that same engineer is billing 20K. I'm giving them, a $900 bonus. My direct labor percent is getting better at 30%, and I'm at a 3.3 multiple of wages. If I can really leverage tools, technology, and standardization, they're billing 25K. That tech is bringing home a $2,000 a month bonus on this particular bonus plan. But because we're only paying them 20% of anything they do over 3x, my direct labor percent just gets better, and my multiple of wages just gets better. The more they leverage tools, technology, and standardization, the more revenue each engineer produces, just giving me a better financial statement. So, and by the way, at each of these yellow boxes, you will be able to put your own numbers in here. Here's the 4 levers. I kind of zoomed in a little bit, but you can set that engineer pay, you can set your billing rate, you can set that ratio that you're able to achieve, and it'll recalculate everything on this page. So for example, if I've got a $90,000 engineer and I leave my rate at 150, everything on this sheet recalculates. I didn't change any of these numbers still, so I'm still 75%. But as I come over here and look at this 4th lever, the P&L changes. When I had that set at 60K, as a 60K engineer, and I go look at what my profit and loss statement will look like, I've got a 15% net profit company, putting $34,000 to the bottom line. If I've got $90,000 engineers and a 150 billing rate, we can see over here on the P&L, now I'm only a 6% company putting $13,000 to the bottom line. Here we can see my gross margin percent is down at 54%. My direct labor as a percent is up to 42%. I'm having a hard time making money. Just to kind of show you those numbers, if I put that back to 60,000 and I go look at what my profit and loss statement might look like, I'm back at a 15% net profit. My labor loaded gross margin's up to 63%. My direct labor percent of raw gross margin is down to 32%. So I built this spreadsheet to really kind of talk and teach about how you can move these levers, right? Every time you're adjusting one of these boxes, if I give 20 vacation days, what happens to my gross margin percent? It barely changes it. If I don't really have a great life of the ticket for triage, dispatch, and engineer time entry, or I'm not holding my engineers accountable to making sure that they're entering their time, I'm at 2 hours a day. Well, now I'm a 9% company. My direct labor is down at 58%. My instead of 33 or 34% direct labor as a percent of gross margin, I'm up 37%. All of a sudden, my numbers aren't looking as good in the way we do business. So just to kind of show you where you can find this sheet, if I jump in here to Academy, whoops, where'd it go? If I jump in here to Academy, if you go to academy.pax8.com, or you go to, if you're in the marketplace and you click the question mark in the top right and go to learning resources, it should load you up to this Pax8 Academy page. You can customize your experience right here by choosing your role, as in I'm an owner, I'm a salesperson, I'm a dispatcher, I'm a service manager. As you choose your role, what displays as course offerings changes. But probably the quickest way is just right here in the search area is just type 4 levers. And it is, actually, I think it's up here, sorry. Search for 4 levers. It's going to bring you into the learning plans that we have out there for the 4 levers. You can go in this one and it'll take you in, or you can go straight to the 4 levers worksheet. If I go in there, it's going to load me straight there. You can download that same worksheet that I was showing you a few minutes ago. Looks like it's running a little bit slow, but right here, click download now. You'll download the exact worksheet I was just showing you. Put your own numbers in, experiment with it, play with it, and you'll get this. I do want to point out that I did lock the cells so you can't accidentally mess it up. If you try to type in the wrong place, it is a locked sheet, but I'm locking it more to protect yourself. So over here, there's a note saying, hey, you can unlock this. Just be aware, you're probably going to mess up some formulas, but you can unlock it with Pax8 coaching as the password. So feel free to have at it. Let's see, is there anything interesting in there? Laura says, oh my gosh, 2 10-minute breaks is 80 hours a year. That's definitely interesting. I agree. It adds up on you fast. And at $150 an hour, that can be some serious billing that's not happening. Let's see, what else do I have that's interesting to show you out there? Watch what happens if we play with this ratio. So I'm going to go back to my 13 sick and vacations and my half hour a day of unaccounted for time. But notice when I come over here and look at this P&L, we're at a 63% gross margin, a 32% direct labor, net profits at about a 15%. And if I look at this tab, there's some settings up here. What percentage of my time is time and materials? I've got it set that 30% is time and materials, meaning 70% of our time entry throughout the day is leveraging tools and technologies and standardization. And that's when this 4th lever comes into play. So if I set that instead of a 1, if I set that at a 0.5, meaning across all of our agreements, we got $100,000 worth of agreements, but we're doing $200,000 worth of work. You see my direct labor went down up to 54% from 23, but it's going to show over here on the P&L tab, instead of a 15% net profit company, my gross margin came down to 54%, and I've got a 42% labor cost instead of a 32% labor cost. So again, all these KPIs get calculated because my engineer's time is so consumed doing twice the amount of labor we should be doing. My ratio of my managed services billing to my total of my costs and expenses, I've heard that referred to as the turning point. I've heard that referred to, what's the term service leadership uses? It's escaping me right now. But we're halfway, right? My total costs and expenses to run the company compared to my recurring revenue, I'm only halfway there. If I can get that back to a 1, I'm 80%. Now I've got a lot more revenue with the same amount of engineer cost, means because I have more revenue with the same amount of engineer cost, I'm now 80% of the way to my turning point. Revenue expense coverage is what service leadership calls it. I've got 80% of my what I need to keep the company in profit territory comes in on my recurring billing. And again, part of one of the things I want you guys to study when you're looking at this sheet is what are these formulas up here, right? What are the formulas? Each one of these things that we calculate has the formulas. This is the math that makes one of these businesses work. Like literally everything I understand about the financial side of running one of these companies has been built into this particular spreadsheet. So I'm hoping that you guys will look at it. Willis is asking if I have a recommended time frame for helping a partner move from a 0.5 to a 0.8 to a 1.0. Making change is hard. Yeah, I tell you, when I've come into companies and I look at the gross margin and we've got a margin problem, I tackle the levers in that order. Is my pay set right? Is my billing rate set right? I've done several talks over the last couple of years on the importance of raising your rates to keep up with the fact that you got to give your employees raises. And so first I go to work on the first 2 levers, then I go to work on utilization. And when I make an operational change, people don't like change. I lower employee satisfaction while I'm making that change. And it's hard. And people aren't going to like the fact that you're asking them to be accountable to processes. But we help them understand we're doing it so they can make more money, right? They can earn bonus because our company's ratios are lined up the way they should be. And once you start showing a little bit of bonus, they start getting interested in helping with getting the processes and standardized processes in order that allow us to get utilization where it should be right around 75%. And that's standardizing the way we use our PSA, getting accurate data, making sure we have our hard costs entered in the auto task contracts or the ConnectWise agreement additions. We got to make sure we have our data right. We work on the life of the ticket, triage, dispatch, time entry, and that helps us get utilization in order. Moving from self-dispatch to centralized dispatch, that all helps with utilization. Then, once I got that in order, I go to work on that 4th lever. I standardize our solution stack. I standardize the way we check every client's backup every day the same way. I standardize the way we document client networks. I standardize the way we're leveraging our RMM tool to do patching so that it can be less labor intensive. The more we work on that, we're working on that 4th lever. The more we're working on that 4th lever, the more we're moving this ratio up. And it's interesting, a lot of times we work on getting accurate data in the PSA and we get connected to, by the way, all this ratio stuff I'm telling you is calculated by, the only tool I know of that can calculate these ratio numbers is MSP CFO. And that's why we're so hot on that particular vendor. And that's why I hope to be talking with Larry next week to talk about these ratios and how we leverage data. But we get that data accurate, and often we're down here in this 0.6, 0.7 range, and so we're working on our flat fee, which is maybe our predominant revenue model for 60 to 70% of our normal billing rates. It makes it pretty much impossible to hit the gross margin numbers we're looking for. And so now we give them the accurate data, and the owners look at it, and I say the 5 stages of grief set in. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And it seems to take about 1.5 years of an owner facing the numbers, wishing that they were different before they start making the tough decisions on why am I at a 0.6? Why are we working for 60% of our normal billing rates on this contract? And it's because, you don't want to raise the rates, or you got a bad contract. It doesn't, you started with 20 employees, now they have 40 employees, but you haven't raised the rates, and you don't want to talk to them because you don't want to risk losing them. but now you're in this cycle of working for 60% of your normal billing rates. So there's a lot of tough decisions to be made. And it's sad to watch that 18 months of 5 stages of grief happen before they start making those tough decisions. So hopefully you'll work on getting some good data and face the reality and make some tough decisions fast. And then you start seeing those multiples increase. So good stuff. So I guess it's time to move on a little bit to just kind of talking about, I'll just do a quick review. There is math. Like, we run these businesses using math through KPIs, but that means we got to work hard on process and procedure to get accurate data so we can make accurate calculations. And we just have to go to work every day on picking a topic and making our data accurate. And the way we do that is by implementing standardized process and procedure. It's hard work. It's a journey of 1,000 miles. And a lot of that 1,000 miles is through the mud. But you take your steps every day. You make your plan, you take your steps every day, and you work on it. And the numbers get better, and the numbers get better, and the numbers get better. So I'm hoping that you take some of this to heart. If you got questions, reach out to your CAM at Pax8 and you get in touch with one of the OSCs, our Operations Solution Consultants. Get involved in some of the areas of Academy. A lot of what I talked about today is an on-demand course under the 4 levers of gross margin. We've got on-demand courses. We've got instructor-led courses. We've got peer groups. We've got one-on-one coaching. We know everybody learns a little bit different. We know everybody's starting at a slightly different maturity level. But the reality is we got to wrap our head around these numbers and start working on them. And I hope you reach out. I hope you learned something. I hope you have something to take away. Download the spreadsheet, because I think you're going to get a lot out of putting your own numbers in there. Schedule some time with your OSC to look at some of your own numbers in the spreadsheet. We're here to help. We know when we help you guys grow and mature the way you do business, you end up doing more business with Pax8 because you need to, because you have more clients, because you're now qualified to work with bigger and larger clients. And that's what we're here to help you do. So I would like to take a minute. I hope to do more shows on Academy Live like this one, where we're just diving in and sharing the content, getting it out there in your guys' hands so you can take it and do something great with it. I would like you to, thank you for watching. Be sure to check us out, like and subscribe. Send this episode to your friends, have them take a look at it and have some talks with them. The more people you talk to about this stuff, the more it's going to sink in. Try teaching it to somebody. Man, if you want to know if you learned something, try teaching it to somebody, because that's where you really realize what's going on. Tune in every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Mountain. We love talking with you. Looking forward to getting more listeners, asking more questions as we do these things. I would like to challenge you to ask yourself, what are you going to do differently tomorrow? And again, like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in.